Right, welcome back to another episode of Discussions. This week we will be going over Gfinity Elite Series, so it is part 2. There will be a link in the description, and maybe if I can edit properly in the video itself coming up, but probably not. Obviously, as always, I am joined by Duck
Hello.
Moriarty, or Michael Moriarty, should I say. So obviously going into this one, I think the last one that we've done, we were kind of hit by timing quite a lot, in terms of
Yeah.
as soon as we'd done the video, lo and behold, like within the following week, all the announcements kind of came out, which was a bit ironic. But at the same point, I still think a lot of the points we went over were pretty relevant. So just as a quick summary, what we went over for the first one, if you have not watched it. So we went over kind of the timescale of dates. So obviously the Elite Series itself was originally announced on the 17th of December, and it was planned to then be launched in April 2017. Obviously that didn't go to plan. The three games, Street Fighter, Rocket League and CS, were all announced between the 17th of November and the 29th of March. Sorry, it was announced on the 17th of November originally, not the 17th of December. And then, so on the 29th of March, Infused, Prophecy, Excel and Reason were all announced as the first 4 orgs to take part. The day after that, Team Envious were announced. The 9th of May, the Gfinity Challenger Series Season 1 was extended, which thus meant that obviously the whole series was delayed from the original planned dates. On the 12th of May, Gfinity announced that they had raised more than 6 million in an oversubscribed placing, which a lot of that money supposedly was going towards the Elite Series. So obviously we discussed various other points in that in terms of the selection process for teams, kind of the status of what teams had or what organisations had picked up what teams. So we're just going to go further more into like the announcements that have followed since we done the original video, and a few more discussion points from that point. So we'll jump on the first one. So obviously on the 18th of May, Team Endpoint joined the Elite Series. So for me, the interesting part of this was like predominantly they'd only been contacted after the original 4 was announced, which I find a bit weird in the fact of, to me personally, especially if it's, I mean, we'll get onto the envious bit in terms of did they or didn't they in terms of pay to kind of get into the Elite Series. Cheeky,
They
they did.
definitely did.
But this is the interesting part, is that obviously to me it just looks very, very chaotic in the way that they've kind of chosen teams, for the fact of, if you had an original plan date of it starting in April, yet you come around to kind of mid-May sort of thing, and you still haven't kind of finalised on the teams that you're trying to get in. So the fact of, I mean, even when those first teams were announced, that like there was some reaction from people within Endpoint, not so like saying that they weren't exactly too happy on the scenario, right? So I find it weird that they've then been approached after that to then see if they want to take part. Like, my way of thinking would be that though that Gfinity would have had a selection process, they would have had a bunch of teams in that list that they're going to approach. Obviously, you don't necessarily know if they've approached other UK teams and they've rejected them, but in terms of picking up UK organisations that are a calibre that you would expect, then they haven't, because there's not many other ones that you could really choose from. So I do find that one a bit weird, but yeah, overall, what are your thoughts on Endpoint being invited to the Elite Series?
So based on their CSGO team, that's as in being one of the best in the UK at some point over the past 12 months. That makes sense. But they're not an organisation steeped in history, or whatever deal has been made there. That's a fair amount of cash.
Yeah, for
sure. For an organisation with not much history, and then with not much name credibility either, outside the CS team, which can go straight into which if this goal goes to pot, ads and whatever, can just start another organisation down the line. It's the thing is they've announced their entire slate of teams as part of the Elite Series.
No, I mean, the way I kind of look at it was, at the time of Endpoint being invited, I was sitting there thinking, you know what, like, as much as I do genuinely like Endpoint, I think everything they're doing is good and they're going in the right direction. My thought process at the time was kind of like, if say like FM at that time didn't get invited, then I would find it a bit weird. just in terms of as much as there's loads of things I feel like FM should be doing better as a whole from an organisation perspective, but at the same point, due to their heritage and due to the current CS team that they had at that point, if you were weighing them up one by one, then you'd probably say FM in that scenario just because of the heritage that FM had, right?
Yes.
So
In fact, FM as an organisation were either not invited or didn't accept their invite is a bit odd.
So I definitely thought that was a bit weird, but at the same point, like, this is where it just comes to Endpoint, and they've just got to make sure that they smash it since they've been in it. So obviously they've had a few changes since then, which we will kind of get into. But yeah, I mean, overall, personally, I'm glad. I think at the end of the day, like, they are an organisation that will try and do the best for the players that they have for the most part. So yeah, hopefully with my big thing was before, because I know they obviously had like some relevance in UK Overwatch for a smaller period of time.
Yeah, because they started out as an organisation with an Overwatch team.
Yeah, with an Overwatch team as well
quite
as then obviously
fairly well
as well.
players. Yeah.
But the Overwatch team, just because of obviously all the shebang about Overwatch as it currently stands, then I just don't think it was necessarily worthwhile for them to kind of keep an Overwatch team at that point. But yes, I mean, overall, I think from my perspective, I actually really like it because of it. Then kind of it forces them. I mean, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen anyway, but it forces them to pick up two other games, right, in Street Fighter and Rocket League. So it expands their portfolio a little bit. So I'm glad that's happened. So it'll be really interesting to see how they deal with that. But yeah, so we'll move on to the next day after that, so the 19th of May. So the dates were announced. So the actual draft, when the draft takes place, will be in 3 days' time on the 16th of June. So that's the point where obviously the players will then be chosen by organisations as to who they're going to play for, essentially. And then the Elite Series itself will start on the 7th of July. So obviously, original start date was meant to be April 2017. And then obviously, as one or two announcements saying certain things were going to be delayed. So the 7th of July is going to be the actual date. As part of that, though, they are also doing a Players' Day, essentially, which they are doing on the 26th and 27th of June. So, I mean, from my perspective, the way that Players' Day is going to be is in terms of...
It's a media day.
Yeah, essentially giving everyone the information that they need, combined with getting some... obviously media-related content for the players and whatnot to kind of build up the Elite Series, and obviously more will happen throughout. But yeah, so I mean, it's kind of good. Being honest, I actually think it's really good because a lot of these UK players will never have experienced a media day like this sort of thing, right? So from a professionalism standpoint,
yeah,
I think it's definitely going to be a kick up the arse for the players. But yeah, go on.
The only things I can think of who would have experienced it before would be the players that went to WCA in China last year. In Counter-Strike, so that'll be more or less the entire FM roster, a couple players in Excel, and some of the some of the Infuse and Endpoint lot. And of course the potential rumoured Epsilon lineup.
Yeah, well, I mean, even with that, I mean, that Epsilon lineup, I mean, we'll touch on it in a bit, but in terms of the rumours of it, like, I mean, I guess they've had various experience within the respective national scenes that they've kind of been playing in before, right? But yeah, for the most part, I'd say that it's definitely going to be good, like, especially for certain these players, and I probably will look towards Reason for this in terms of the lineup with the most inexperience, shall we say. I guess it'll be interesting, but I think these sort of environments, putting them in a Players' Day and a Media Day sort of thing, will definitely be a kind of, not necessarily, I don't mean it as a kick up the arse, but I just mean in terms of the professionalism standpoint, to kind of make people think, like, sit up and realise, oh look, we're doing this stuff now, like, overall maybe we've got to start acting more professional as a whole, which I think the scene is very much in need of. I mean, so essentially the tournament's been delayed for around 2-3 months from the original announcement. Even on their website, it's like this was a bit that triggered me a bit, actually, in terms of I don't think the people that are writing it really know what they're doing, just for the pure fact that within the announcement where they put the public dates, even on their website there is announcements of dates, and they state talented gamers will be drafted into the UK's top professional teams and will initially launch in the UK, and teams will be UK based. Now, like, don't get me wrong, I have no problem if that isn't the case, but obviously why would you state something like that when obviously you've got an Envious, you've got an Epsilon who are from, like, you know what I mean?
Belgium.
Epsilon are Belgian, yeah.
You got Envious are American, Epsilon are Belgian. The rest of them are British.
But so it weirds me out in terms of the way they put those statements in terms of talented games will be drafted into the UK's top professional teams. Obviously, they're not all UK lineups. And secondly, it would like all teams will be UK based, and it's like, well, they're fucking not. So
they'll be UK based in the aspect of that the tournament's taking part in London, and all teams will have to be in London during the thing.
Potentially, if that's what they mean by it, yeah. But I mean, it's still. I guess if we're going to go across a lot of the Gfinity media announcements, that's probably the stuff that they've handled the poorest, combined with just wording in certain publicised documents that they've released have been a bit like, hang on a minute, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I'm not too sure if they've necessarily got a copywriter in the background checking over it. Obviously, evidently, it seems they have not. But anyway, obviously, I think the first video was predominantly negative, so let's try and stay away from that one. But all right, so 24th of May, this one was me and you had conversations in terms of who we thought the kind of teams were going to be rounded out by. You were a bit surprised by this. My apologies, phone's just going off. Excellent.
Did you forget to put silent on? What are you playing?
I did. The professionalism in these videos is fucking terrible. Anyway, yeah, this is it. But yeah, so obviously on the 24th of May, Method GG were announced as the 7th team to join the Elite Series. Now, for me, I knew who Method were. Like, I'd heard of them, I'd seen them. I know, like, predominantly the only reason that I'd seen them was through, like, some streamers and content-related people they had on board that I'd kind of seen and whatnot before, but I never looked at them as an esports organisation.
Well, no, they've had CSGO teams before in the past, but their North American lineup, which was a moderately successful side, collapsed after Kingwin started pulling out sponsoring teams.
That actually had a really, really big effect at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, because that was like a lot of teams lost their professional funding and dropped out. It didn't do anything in the long run for esports, which is a good thing, but it just meant their North American team had to find a different home, and they ended up just splitting in a long sense. They had a CIS region side early last year, but that collapsed.
As most did.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I mean, I did find it interesting, but at the same point, then from obviously doing a bit more research on Method themselves, like, I'm probably excited by them the most if I'm going to pick anyone. If I'm 100% honest, like, I mean,
because they've gone in and picked up the best CS team in the country. So they obviously been right. We're going to do it right, and not going to just fly in a French Academy side or some random European mix with Smoothie on it. And they're gonna focus on UK, so they've gone straight in. We're gonna want to win the Elite Series via CS, and we're gonna buy the best team in the country.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, we'll go more specifically into rosters and players and who's changed, because there has been a fair amount of changes recently anyway, especially for CS. But yeah, for me, like, when I've been looking over Method, I think that they do seem to do a really good job in terms of the content and like promoting the streamers and whatnot they have under them.
You can see that that's straight away when they announce the team, because who they got as a manager on screen.
Yeah, I mean,
straight with a massive name at the top.
Definitely. I was a bit surprised by that, but obviously on screen's got very, very good relationships with a lot of UK players. Obviously having been involved in it. Obviously for Four Kings. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting one, but yeah, I'm genuinely quite excited to see what Method can do. Like, one of the few other things is, even if you look on their website, like, surprisingly enough, they have an updated, consistently content-esque website, and it's amazing. Like, very few UK organisations manage to do this.
Why are you fighting?
I can't help it. I just have a natural instinct to flame everything UK, but yeah, so obviously very, very happy about that for the most part. Like, I do think that they should be able to do a really good job with it. But then we'll round it out. So on the 26th of May, and I don't think a lot of people actually saw this one coming. So Epsilon Esports became the final org to join the Elite Series. So like, I have no problem with Epsilon coming into it because of they are a big established org by this point, albeit maybe a feeder team in certain scenarios. But from the beginning, this is where I've always wanted it to be a mix of UK and international organisations, right? But to me, it still makes me think that the selection process for this has been weird, just in terms of that. Obviously now there's 2 international orgs in Epsilon and in Envious, right?
Yep.
So you've only got the 2 international orgs that are actually there. Now, the one thing that I'm a bit interested by this is that this is what we kind of just said previously in terms of like the way that it's been announced. Envious were the only ones to come out and speak about it being a longer than 1 year type plan, combined with the fact of obviously the rumours are that Envious did pay supposedly up to 100 grand in order to enter the tournament and be part as one of the franchise teams. Now personally, I don't think Epsilon would have paid 100k to enter said tournament, just because if they're in that, in terms of levels of organisations, they're not quite at the top, but they're just below. They're that, like, probably the tier 2 organisation that you're going to look at, right? So I don't think that from their perspective, they would think that investing 100k into the Elite Series would have been a worthwhile investment off the outset of it, right? So then you're looking at it specifically, and it's okay, well, is there just one team that's actually come in and paid a franchise fee? Like, to me, that's very, very weird for that to happen, right? In terms of having just the one team that comes in that pays that. Secondly, the fact that it is a predominantly UK-based tournament, which is great. Like, obviously, big respect for Gfinity to actually trying to do that and build up the UK scene more. But I don't understand the selection process at all. Realistically, I don't have any problems with the team, barring the original Prophecy one, which was the one that obviously most people have got a bit of a hang on a minute type scenario going for it. But
they still haven't announced the CS:GO team yet, and I don't think they're going to do in time for Friday.
Yeah, I mean, that's
which means they're going to make it up an entirely random roster.
Exactly that.
So I can't wait for that to finish last.
But yeah, I don't know where it stands in terms of how they've decided to kind of choose these organisations. In terms of, for me, I would have probably actually liked another 2 international orgs in there. Like, I'm not going to start going into it and being like, oh well, maybe if that org came in and replaced that UK org. I'm not about that. Like, for all the teams,
I mean, considering the rumours I heard before, like the final teams were announced.
I mean, we discussed some.
This is quite underwhelming, to be honest. Like Epsilon and Method, okay, like mid-tier organisations, one that hasn't had a role in Counter-Strike since early 2016, hasn't had a proper esports like offering since then either. Great, and then Epsilon, which is like a fairly alright organisation, done some good stuff in console games. Yeah. It's not bad, but I expected better.
I just don't find the balance correct, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to put it, right? In terms of that,
because a lot of people, including Dom Sacco, who did an article complaining after Envious had their announcement, was expecting UK-based organisations like for the entire thing.
Yeah.
So expected people like sign up to play for Fnatic's UK lineup or whatever.
Yeah.
Which didn't happen, of course.
It's definitely. I just find it like you read out the team names, and obviously like you're going to read out the 6 UK orgs, then you're going to go Epsilon and then Envious.
Yeah.
Right, and if you're saying it in that context,
it goes
like, hang on a minute.
Because if you list it, it goes like Prophecy, Endpoint, Excel, Reason, Infused, Method, Epsilon, Envious, all the way up there.
And that's exactly.
It's a massive jump in terms of prestige.
So I definitely find it weird. I don't, being honest, I would love to find out what Envious's perspective on the whole thing is and the way that they actually view the Elite Series at the moment, because it's like from their perspective, obviously the way I can view it is that out of all the tournaments that all their teams participate in, the Elite Series is going to be lower in that pile, right, in terms of what's prioritised, what's their big thing that they're trying to, focus on. Whilst all the other organisations, they're going to look at it and think, this is our chance, this is the big place for us to like try and kind of get our name further out there, maybe try and get more investment, perform well, etc., etc. So yeah, definitely a weird one, but we'll kind of move into the kind of team side of things a little bit. So team infused. So I mean, for the most part, a lot of teams have got the vast majority of their like teams for each game sorted. Infused are one of those organisations that do have free for free in terms of CS, Rocket League, and Street Fighter. Infused did have a couple of roster changes, so obviously they Rattlesnake and Robin were replaced by Eccles and Fry1, or Fry, however you want to say his name.
Yeah, I missed the Fry transfer.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't, good old Infused, as they generally tend to do, they didn't really put much in the way of why those players left or anything like that. It was just a one-sentence thing in the new announcement saying for Eccles and Fry had joined them. Although the one thing I would on that is massive respect to Eccles in terms of that kid's grinded it out and he's managed to kind of work his way up by doing that.
Eccles is.
He's someone that 6 months
right.
ago you wouldn't have then probably put in the lineup that he is now. But he's kind of networked himself really, really well, and he showed that he wants to do it. So props to him for that. Definitely be interested. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed in a way just because of Robin is a very, very, very talented player, but obviously due to VAC ban previously, that's why he's not eligible to play. Rattlesnake, I was hyped as hell when I saw that lineup announced, and I was like, shit, Rattlesnake's back, let's go, boys. But yeah, obviously one reason or another hasn't come to fruition, so I don't necessarily know what the deal is with Rattlesnake from this point forward. Rocket League wise, Infused do actually have personally one of the better lineups for Rocket League that are currently in it at the moment. Street Fighter, like, in fairness, I don't even want to say much in terms of on Street Fighter. Like,
got no idea what's going on there.
Yeah, I've got a rough idea, but my big issue is that say like after so Street Fighter overall, I've got a rough idea. My big problem is that I'll look through achievements of certain players and I don't know what quality that tournament that they participated in was, so it's difficult for me to judge, being honest. So I've tried doing a bit of research on Street Fighter, to be fair, but the only one that I genuinely know, like player wise off the top of my head, like from as we go through, is like Infectious, who's playing for XL. I know of him, I know of Hurricane, I know of a couple of the others as well, but I don't want to go into too much detail of it. Endpoint, obviously, they're another team that have had some interesting changes, to say the least, of recent times. So as it currently stands, obviously the roster is Imi, Max, Cryptix, Jesp. I don't know who the fifth is, because I know they've got Ruli as their sub going into it, but I don't know who their fifth is. Obviously that was combined with the fact that Smooyart is then essentially, it's not confirmed yet, but he's supposedly getting bought out by Epsilon.
I mean, he's on the ACA roster, so that's...
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows it's pretty much confirmed. It's just not actually been confirmed.
Yeah. So no one's fucking out about it, because Epsilon had their site killed, and Endpoint just haven't bothered yet.
I noticed that.
Endpoint have SEO still under contract until tomorrow, as of recording, which is the 14th of June. So whether or not he gets his contract extended quickly to continue playing, or they bring in another completely random player, it's
a maybe. But then who knows? I mean, I think the problem is, especially with someone like SEO, who you'd expect still wants to compete and play in teams, is that going to get in the way of him doing so, and things like that? Is it necessarily going to be worth it? Prophecy, they've got their Rocket League team, they've got their Street Fighter team. Nothing on the CS:GO side of things, like you touched on a minute ago. So, I mean, obviously the big thing is there's nothing that stops them from picking up a non-UK team. So the way that we're thinking about it, in terms of if they are going to pick up a UK team, who realistically do you pick up that's actually going to be a challenge? Because there's a couple of teams that are looking to potentially be good. You've got like Sashiki's lineup and things like that, but from a stability point of view, you know what I mean, are they going to be looking at it and think, well, hang on a minute, the amount of changes that have necessarily happened? I'm not saying that's their fault, by the way. Obviously, sometimes they are forced, but I'm just saying the way that they're looking at it, is it going to be worthwhile? Are they going to think this team's going to potentially win me the Elite Series? You know what I mean? So I'd highly expect Prophecy to move down the roads of getting a kind of EU team in at the very least. If they are going to pick, well, they have to pick up a CS team, so it'd be very interesting. I mean, they haven't got long, that's the thing. So definitely be really, really interested to see what happens with the Prophecy one. XL are another one of the three that have all 3 games filled. They probably done it the most efficiently in terms of getting it all done, getting it done quickly, so respect to XL for actually getting that done. Obviously the CS roster, Jake and Boaster, Connor, Windansky and Lazar. Good lineup, to be fair. I genuinely feel like those lads, they didn't qualify for UK Masters, that being said, that XL lineup, did they? So I'm intrigued.
Sure?
I'm pretty sure they didn't, because it came down onto the final day, didn't they? Because then it was like Infused and Misfits team.
There's still an open spot, because I don't think
the Radix
Fish is getting Radix or Fish getting the invite again.
As far as I'm aware, so yeah, I'm not entirely sure what happens with that.
I'm pretty sure that spot's up for grabs.
But yeah, so interesting from that. The Rocket League team that Excel have picked up, I've looked up a little bit. I mean, they've had some relatively decent performances here and there, but none which I would kind of look at and say they're going to be the top tier Rocket League team out the lot. Street Fighter, again, I've already mentioned Infectious, who's a very, very good player. Reason are still missing Street Fighter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So obviously CS-wise, Hoodlum, Thomas, Cray, Karma, Cinder. So I mean, even when we were touching on it a little bit earlier, actually, in terms of the players that they have, and I guess, like, I mean, Karma's been around for a while, Cinder's been around for a while. I guess Cray, Thomas, and Hoodlum they've been around for a while, but they're still newer in the grand scheme of things in terms of playing at slightly higher levels. So be interesting to see what happens with them. I do think it would definitely be a good experience for them at the very minimum. But they're definitely a team that can cause some problems. So I do feel like as long as they put the time and work in, that they can definitely put up a performance for sure. Obviously Street Fighter, I mean, yes, it starts. The one thing that I don't know, actually, and this is where I'm slightly intrigued, is I don't know if Gfinity have given a set date to organisations of when they need every team confirmed by, because like we kind of said,
they've got the draft on this Friday, so I assume that's the date. I assume the date will have to be by Players' Day.
Yeah, that's what I was literally about to say. Is I would expect that to be the scenario, because of it kind of makes it a bit redundant if you don't have players ready for Players' Day.
Because the draft is this Friday, the teams pick up the players they haven't got yet, so they have to pick up their 2 subs for CS:GO. Their 2 Rocket League subs, and then 2 Street Fighter players. Yeah. So I assume this Friday is the cut-off date to which
obviously leads to the point, right? Like that these teams, by this point, they should pretty much 100% know who they're getting. It just falls down onto sorting out contracts and sorting out the final bits of the process, right? Like if you're in this point and you still don't know who you're picking up, then there's a fundamental problem there.
That's not how a draft works, though, is it?
No, I'm not saying for the draft. I'm saying in terms of outside.
For the other team. Yeah.
Right. For the draft, we'll
get on to that. Essentially, if it comes to the Thursday night, and Prophecy hasn't announced a CS:GO team yet, they're making up a draft. If MVS haven't announced their CS:GO team yet, then they're using their French academy.
Definitely want to go into the more specifics of the draft, which we will do. But I fully get where you're coming from in that, in terms of for any teams that don't necessarily pick up one, at least their last ditch option is to kind of form some form of team from the draft series. But to me, I would still say, I'd still say you're better off putting a ragtag team elsewhere outside of the Challenger Series would be the better way to go. But then, so we move on to Method. So obviously CS:GO, obviously the big one, which obviously I did kind of want to do a separate video on this, that being said as well, just to kind of go for it, because there's a lot of specifics with this deal which we're both very intrigued by, at the least, in terms of how Method did pick up that FM esports roster. So Nilzinho, Weber, Stanley, Pulse, Jenko has obviously came back into the fold to replace Fry or Fry1. On screen has come in as manager, obviously the kind of everyone knows on screen at this point, and then they've brought in Keita as coach as well. So I mean, touching on it, I guess the big thing that intrigued me was it was only recently that FM announced their new partnership, or the extended partnership with eBuyer, right? And as far as I was aware at that point, that deal was essentially then giving the FM players a salary. I don't know what the figure on that salary was, but that was happening. So for obviously that to kind of just completely do a 360, and obviously now they're playing under Method, the way that I'm looking at that is that Method have obviously come through, and like, don't get me wrong, I do think that from the players' perspectives, with an offer coming in to play in the Elite Series, but we've already discussed this in terms of there were previous offers for them to leave to go play under another.
FM have received offers from other Elite Series teams already to join them to play in the Elite Series. I'm vaguely aware of certain organisations there. I'm not going to name any names, but I'm pretty sure Envious did launch I've heard random words that Envious launched a questionable offer to see if they want to play for them, which was turned down because they're going to get salary with FM. So whether the salary that was offered by FM was actually lower than expected, or they've had a falling out with Yak, or Method has offered an absolute fuck ton of cash to pick them up for the foreseeable future, who knows? But yeah, the fact they've left FM and they've joined another organisation, because in the past they've said, I'm pretty sure on the record as well, that they want to build up FM as an organisation alongside them. And the fact that eBoy came in alongside probably for the Counter-Strike team, this hasn't gone very well for FM.
I mean, we had it in one of the Phoenix UK before the previous
Yeah.
Fire series, I think, when Neil
Yeah,
Zinio
it was
came
in,
on, wasn't it? And we asked the question then in terms of like what's the deal with FM in terms of obviously at that point like salaries for like Excel and Endpoint were becoming more public knowledge and the kind of everything around it. And even Neil said that obviously they wanted to stick with FM. So, I mean, personally, the way I look at it is I do feel like it's been more of a falling out than, say, like someone coming in offering the big bucks, but at the same point, money talks at the end of the day, you never know. But it's definitely an interesting one. It's something that I would probably like to go into more specifics for on another day. But either way, like, I guess the outcry from it is going to be that I'm genuinely happy that they are participating in the Elite Series because of, at the end of the day, it's a very, very talented lineup. They've been one of the most consistent lineups of the UK CS scene for the last 6 months to a year. It's definitely one that I'm looking forward to actually seeing them participate. And being honest, like, depending on what this like Epsilon roster is going to be, like, I would still pinpoint that new Method roster as the team that would probably win the Elite Series as it currently stands.
Yeah, of course. Unless,
well, I mean, it kind of
unless Epsilon's lineup actually does fairly well and blows out of the park.
Yeah, for sure.
The Method lineup should win.
But
this lineup actually a good lineup. I don't know.
I know it's a subject for another day as well, but I mean, you did kind of touch on it then in terms of like where does this necessarily leave FM as a whole, and it's a bit of a weird spot. I mean, for an organisation that's not really ever marketed themselves too well in the grand scheme of things, like where does it leave them? Was that eBuyer relationship or partnership, sponsorship, however you want to necessarily pull it, was that fundamental to having that CS team? Like, I would have imagined it probably was, just because the only other team they have is a female CS roster, right? Which, by the way, as always, isn't listed on their website, so thanks for that.
They've got a Rocket League team as well, which I found out whilst trolling their website.
They
don't have a proper... Yeah, it's on the third page, I think, but they don't have a proper team page. Which, by the way, organisations, anyone here and watching them, make sure you have a dedicated team page, which you regularly update. It makes my fucking job easier.
But like, again, I know we're probably going into separate subjects. I done part of this as a video the other day in terms of like maintaining websites and things like that. But like, it just, please update your rosters of who you've got. Like, it makes it so much more accessible for journalists, for anyone else like that's essentially a stakeholder within esports to go on and actually look and see who plays for you. At the moment, you're looking at, oh, well, they don't have any teams. Fair enough, that's a non-existent org. See you later. Like, that's the way that you can potentially look at it. And I don't mean that as a complete flame to FM, because I respect everything they've done, but at the same point, just update your website to see FM put an article on that one as well. But yeah. So obviously,
the only team they've got now is their female team.
Yeah.
And they've got a agreement with eBuyer until 2018, so I'm not sure what's going to happen with them there.
The thing is that because of they're an organisation that's generally always performed well in achievement basis anyway, in terms of like the teams that they've picked up and how well they've performed within UK tournaments, then especially from a CS standpoint, like, who do they really try and pick up? You know what I mean? Are they going to go into other games? And even if they do, I mean, obviously they've got a history in League and other games like that, so it's games that they can potentially go back into. But I think they're getting to a point where other orgs are coming forward and starting to do a lot more from a media side of it, so are you necessarily going to think that FM's the better choice in that scenario? Who knows? But yeah, carrying on from the Method one, obviously they've got their Rocket League team as well, and their Rocket League team is actually very highly rated, which kind of obviously puts me on to saying earlier on that Method are probably one of the ones to kind of look out for, and that at the moment I'm probably giving the kind of the thumbs up to who I expect to actually come out on tops of all this. Street Fighter for Method is a weird one, is they do have
they have Street Fighter players, but they're in the States. So
yeah,
unless they're flying over for the period of 3 months whilst the tournament happens, or they're going to have European-based Street Fighter players, that's still to be announced. Wait till Friday, I guess.
Yeah, but I find it interesting just because the 2 out of 3 that they already have are high caliber, right? So I mean, it's weird. I'm going to be interested to see what they do with Street Fighter, because I don't think the way I'm going to perceive it to be anyway is that they want all 3 games at the highest level as possible, and that's what they're going to try and do. So very
Yep.
interested to see what happens with that. Now, I guess the big talking point out of all of this is what the fuck is going to go on with Envious.
Yeah. So Envious, do they have a Rocket League team yet? Is the question.
Not from what I literally checked, unless something else has come out.
Right, so Envious have only a Counter-Strike roster. They've got 2 Counter-Strike rosters, one of which is their...
Which we still don't know if that Academy team is going to be the one participating in this. Like, nothing's... literally, since that announcement of the Elite Series, nothing else has come out of Envious in terms of who's doing what. So, I'm very intrigued by this.
So far, Envious have joined Elite Series and not announced anything else. So, are they going to pick up? I assume they're going to have first pick in draft because they've given.
Well, yeah, if they're the only team that's fucking paid to get into it, right?
Yeah,
like,
they're going to have first pick in draft. They're going to have the
but
choice of the best
from
player.
their perspective, like from a business side, like Hastro's just sitting there thinking, hang on a minute,
What
we've
the
just
fuck have I
joined an
done?
8-team league and we're the only team that's paid 100k to participate in this fucker. Like, surely you're going to be looking and be like, hang on a minute, this is a bit
What
wrong.
have I done? What have I done? Yeah.
So yeah, obviously nothing's come out of that way. I mean, in their original announcement when Envious joined, they did state towards like they wanted to do or be more involved in the UK sports and the talent that comes out of it. So
I imagine if they were sure about that, they would have definitely tried to pick FM up.
Well,
but,
this is. It would imply that they're going to go down the road of UK talent.
This rumour that Envious were trying to pick up the FM roster, which is now the Method roster, was complete bollocks. Why I would just think of why didn't they go and approach it?
Yeah, potentially.
Or if their idea of UK sports is ignoring Counter-Strike and just focusing on Rocket League and Street Fighter.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, from the way that I'd kind of look at it is, I mean, I was told various rumours that so-and-so org was approaching FM to take that CS team, so I don't know definitively of what one was right and what one was wrong, but realistically I think you'd be a bit foolish to assume that no one did approach them, because if they are essentially the better team to go pick up at that point.
They have been the best Counter-Strike team in the past 12 months,
exactly,
without a doubt, and they've had minor changes at best.
I think the rest of Envious in terms of what they do Rocket League, Street Fighter wise, I mean, yeah, it's up for grabs at the moment. No one knows what the hell they're going to do. And I mean, you never know. It might turn out Envious just kind of pull out of the Elite Series completely, and another team comes into it, right? Like
I can't see that happening because contract their money they've paid already.
Yeah, but I mean, logistically,
that is unlikely to happen.
Logistically, I get where you're coming from, but at the same point, I just find it a very intriguing process to the fact that nothing's come out of them. There's been no player, no team announcements, no real follow-up to the Elite Series as a whole. They're the only team that's paid 100 grand to get into it, supposedly. From their perspective, it just looks like they're not fully involved in it. But at the same point, I actually assume that it will go swimmingly and they're just literally going to do one big announcement and everything's announced at the same point. That's the way that I'm going to assume it will go with Envious from this point onwards. But we'll move on to the 8th and final one, which was Epsilon. So Epsilon is another one that we don't really know what the deal is going to be with teams and players across the board in terms of CS, Rocket League and Street Fighter. Now the rumoured, and I do say rumoured, CS lineup for them at the moment is Freddie B, Barbar, good old Smooya, Mei and Cosmine. So on paper, very, very talented lineup.
Yeah.
Very.
So all their Swedish players have gone away to random organisations, so they're going to focus on this European.
I find it interesting from the Epsilon point of view that I think it's going to be more difficult for them, if anyone, because of it is kind of just piling a new team together and it's people from different places more so than just 5 dedicated UK players who might not have played together before but they know each other. So I mean, I'm interested to see how that goes, but then due to the calibre of player, then in theory you would then kind of counteract that and say, well, they should know better and they should be able to handle it better in those scenarios.
I mean, theoretically they could not put that European-wide lineup on and instead put their French lineup into the Elite Series because they have a French team.
Who is their French team at the moment?
some French players I've never heard of.
Cool. Yeah, potentially they could. I don't really know. I mean, would they have necessarily gone out of a buyout of Smooya if they weren't necessarily going into the Elite Series? Like, would they pay? I know obviously they've just made supposedly like anywhere between 100k and 200k from Rez going to Nip anyway. So, I mean,
So
who
they paid
really knows with that?
$10,000 for Smooya.
But for Rocket League and Street Fighter, it's the same scenario. So I guess this is the point where we get onto in terms of what happens with the draft, right? So the point that I'm still going to make is I still don't feel like the Challenger Series is going to work in the way that people have tried to intend it to, because I still feel like for the most part for CS and Rocket League, in a way that the people that get drafted are just not going to be used, of which if that does happen, I will just state, like, how does Gfinity deal with that? Because surely they can't just say, oh, it's perfectly fine for people to have subs, for them not to get used, to be salaried and not doing anything with it. Like, it's just redundant doing that as a whole. There is no benefit to doing it like that. I mean, so I'll be the first person that will hold my hands up and be really, really surprised if any teams do actually use any of these drafted players for Rocket League and CS. Obviously, we've discussed it last time in the previous video in terms of Street Fighter's the only one where I can see the draft system actually working to a good standard, but I don't, you know what I mean, if you're looking at that, like the new method lineup, they're not going to go want to replace any one of their players with someone that's just got through from the draft. Like, why would you do it? Especially, so I just, especially
you have to be fucking mental.
Exactly, especially when you have subs as well.
Yeah.
I would genuinely love someone from Gfinity to please just come and tell me how that is going to work.
Yeah, like, I mean, again, apparently they're supposed to have a 7-team roster before the draft players.
Yeah. So then if you have potentially 9 players, how's that going to work? Unless the only way I can see this working is as part of within the contracts of Gfinity Elite Series of being part of it, that they've stated drafted players have to get X amount of allocated game time. That's the only way I can see that working. But even then, if they were to do that, surely teams and that from that perspective going into it are going to be like, oh, hang on a minute, how is that going to actually benefit us? We want to play with this team so we can practice with this team and focus on the long term. You know what I mean? You don't, so yeah, by all means, if a representative of Gfinity does watch this shambolic video and can come forward and be like, yeah, this is how it's going to, please do, because I'm actually baffled as to how that process is actually going to be beneficial to anyone apart from that one dude that ends up getting a salary for sitting on a bench.
Because I imagine Bedford's 7-team roster will be the 5 players.
I would imagine that
on-screen is one sub and on-screen is the other sub.
Yeah, I would imagine that's the way that they probably are going to do it, yeah. Although that being said, I don't know what Gfinity's rulings on coaches are. That being said, as to how much influence they
I'd
can
imagine
have.
I'd imagine they'd use Valvors considering they've already blocked.
Yeah, I would fully imagine they will, but you know what I mean, you never know, I guess. But like the part, so obviously shit aspects of the Challenger Series aside, the one part where obviously it can be beneficial is that for teams going into it that don't have confirmed lineups could then potentially form a team out of drafted players. So obviously for the ones at the moment, so whether it be, like again for Street Fighter, we've already said that Street Fighter, the sides of it can be very beneficial because of it's individually rather than team based. So for Epsilon, Envious, Method, Reason that don't have Street Fighter players at the moment, that should work fine if they are going to go down that avenue and just recruit from that if they don't have any specific people outside that they're already eyeing up. But for Envious, Epsilon, for Rocket League and CSGO, and I think Prophecy for CSGO as well, do you really want to go down the road of, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it's good in a way that it gives them that option that if they can't manage to sign a team somehow or another, that they have the option to be able to field a team of drafted players, but at the same point, like their inability to secure a team going into the event, if they, you know what I mean, surely that's a problem in itself if they go into the event without an actual specific team and they go down the road of using it from drafted players. Like, because of the way I would still look at this from how can we get the best possible team that we can, I would still rather go down the road of going and getting individual players that you still have some form of knowledge of than going down a draft series where you don't. Right? Surely that would still be the better option for you to try and get the best achievement and results possible. So still very, very pros and cons, I guess, in that it's good in a way that it enables orgs to do that, bad in a way that it kind of looks a bit lackluster and inefficient from orgs if they do go into it and don't have said teams and players already signed up and as a done deal. Street Fighter specifically, we've already said the draft series can be very beneficial. Teams, yeah, I just don't see it. I really, really fucking don't. I would love. I will actually do this. Like as soon as someone uses like a sub that's part of the draft series, I'll hold my hands up and be like, fair enough. But even if it does happen, it'll probably be once, and that's just because someone can't make it, right? Like I don't see any other aspects of that. But right, so yeah,
it's how long is the league going on for?
6 weeks, is it not?
6 weeks, yeah. So it's 6 week league. So the odds are a player's not going to be able to make one of the weekends to play. So. Yeah. Theoretically, a substitute will be used, right? Whether or not it's going to be from the 17 roster or it's going to be from the Elite Series, that's still up for grabs. I'd imagine some of them, like, I don't know, well, I imagine Prophecy would be because they're from Wikipedia. But I'd imagine whatever lineups Curry don't have the 7-player squad yet, they definitely would.
Well, I am interested to see who, especially for CS and Rocket League, just because they're the 2 games that I've got the most knowledge on out of the 3, of who these teams do actually list as their subs. Because of, I'm assuming anyway that these teams have got to be a bit careful in terms of they can't just pick any old player, because of if that other player is currently playing within a team that's not part of the Elite Series, then in terms of whether it be contractually, in terms of how that affects it between both organisations, because you can't, like, you know what I mean, you're not going to be contracted for the same role within 2 different orgs. So I'm interested to see, I mean, this is kind of like with the Endpoint one in terms of Ruli being added to the subs list, but obviously he's technically not on a roster at the moment anyway, so it makes sense for that to happen. But for someone that is, so I'm interested to see what the calibre, or if certain teams might just go down the road of, look, this is going to be our 5, we're going to try and make every week. If we can't, then we will be forced to use someone from the draft. Like that's a potential way that it could go. But if anything. So then overall, like what, like from our obviously previous video that we done to this week, are you happy with the announcements of, say, like Endpoint, Method, and Epsilon coming into it? What's your overall conclusion on that going to be?
Yeah, I mean, having like Epsilon, the way Bedford have come into it, great. They want a win. That's brilliant. Then they've already announced teams to work for it. That's great. They're already making progress. Epsilon haven't announced much yet. The rest of the thing is going fairly alright, I guess.
Do you find it a bit weird in a way that you see, say, like a Method come into it that have come in on the 24th of May when they've been announced, and they've already got 2/3, maybe 3 out of 3 already sorted, and they're high caliber.
Yeah.
Like, does that then kind of beg questions over other organisations as well? Like, especially going into this, Method are going to be the ones that you'd probably assume wouldn't necessarily have as high a knowledge because of. I don't mean to say they've been community-based like you've touched on in terms of obviously they have had certain rosters for CS in the past as well, but in terms of like small segments into it, they've not really been the biggest esports organisation, as opposed to certain other even UK orgs that you'd maybe expect to kind of get these deals done quicker than what they have. So for Method to kind of be announced on the 24th and already have that stuff signed up, but then you've got teams that were originally announced on like the 29th of March and yet are still missing teams or players, right? So surely you're going to look at that and be like, well, there's a problem here in the fact that you haven't been able to get. I'm not saying, obviously, as always, it's easier said than done. You know, a lot of these talks, maybe they've spoke to certain teams and players and they've gone to other organisations, but obviously then it goes down on, are their negotiation skills good enough? Like, you can be very analytical of it if you really wanted to. But yes, I mean, I agree with those. In terms of the setback of the dates, obviously it was originally announced to be in April. Obviously, we're now in June, and obviously it starts in the start of July. So what are your thoughts on how that's been delayed?
I mean, it's not great, is it, for the orgs? Because originally I would have had a load of time to develop, choose the players, and then sign them up and.
I mean, you say that.
And
Do you
have
think
logistics.
it's given people an unfair advantage as well in terms of the way that they've done it, because of the discrepancy between announcing certain teams like all at different stages, and like we already discussed in terms of the Endpoint one, that they weren't aware by the time the original 4 were announced, or even 5, that they were going to be part of it. So surely it's an unfair advantage to orgs that have been announced later because if they haven't had the same time frames to kind of, you know what I mean, get everything prepared, shall we say.
Yeah, true. That makes sense actually. Yeah, that's right.
So I mean, I find that one a bit intriguing to the way that they've gone around it. But I mean, look, I'm gonna probably round this off in my overall thoughts on. I mean, I doubt we're gonna do a part 3. I guess like we might do when it comes, like we might do some form of content related to Gfinity, like once the tournament and whatnot starts. I mean, in fairness, we could even do one after the draft happens and see what kind of the outcomes and the way that actually works out. Because by that point, we're gonna have full detailed team rosters and lineups by that point, right? But yeah, my overall thing is look, I'm happy that Gfinity are doing this genuinely, because if they have run decent tournaments like previously for them, well obviously international tournaments, not specifically focused on the UK, but they have been to a good standard and a lot of people have always been very positive about that. The second thing is I am also happy because I do feel like the supposed media attention and publicity that's going to come out of the Elite Series for UK esports as a whole, I do feel like will also be very beneficial. I do feel like it's something that is vastly needed, and especially content to be coming out that's to a very good standard as well, not just like tier 7 e.g. my sort of content. Furthermore, I would also say look, I guess at the end of the day, the only 2 gripes that anyone's really going to have with the Elite Series are going to be A, the selection process in how it's been chosen and how it's actually happened, and in terms of has it been fair in terms of announcing certain teams at different points. And the second point, obviously the negative side, is going to be the draft series. But I think overall, and this is going to be, I mean, I'm trying to be positive, I really am. I do feel like there are a lot more positives than negatives to this whole thing, right? Like for sure. So going forward, hopefully, obviously everything goes swimmingly. Hopefully we do see a lot of content come out of everything. But yeah, for me overall, I guess I don't like, we haven't meant to kind of focus on the negatives as much as we have, right? But at the same point,
We just don't know enough to give positives.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, I guess the third.
But yeah,
point...
what are the positives is giving the UK seed and major money tournaments a focus on. That's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean,
they still haven't announced enough that we can go, oh, this is gonna be a brilliant tournament.
I guess like, even in the first one, the point that you made, like, and obviously from your point being a journalist, especially where it comes to fruition a bit more, right, is in terms of the way that they've dealt with their media side of things. But yeah, any kind of round-out thoughts that you wanna put forward besides telling Gfinity to give us information?
I'm just gonna sit and wait for now. Really?
just patiently.
Not much you can do. Not much else I can do.
Alright, I respect that. Alright guys, anyway, so obviously this has been the Gfinity Elite Series Part 2. For the most part, all we've gone over is just kind of the following news of the further teams that have kind of been announced, the dates that have been announced, as well as vaguely going through some of the lineups that have been announced already. Like I said, I mean, myself and Duck's knowledge on Street Fighter is a bit lackluster, to say the least, for us to really give a kind of
lackluster or non-existent.
I mean, I've got a bit. I wouldn't say it's lackluster, but I would say it's shit in comparison. Like by far. Like I don't know the distinction of level of tournaments. So say like if I'm reading up and being like, okay, this guy from XL won this and that, but I don't know the quality of that tournament in comparison to others, right? So it's difficult to judge from that perspective. But yes, obviously we've been over various team lineups and certain changes. We may or may not do more follow-ups depending on sort of the kind of stuff that comes out of Gfinity coming into it. But final bit I'm just going to say is obviously as much as we can for anyone that is kind of like a stakeholder and just watching it and participating in it, we've got to try and, you know, back it as much as possible in terms of when that content does come out, help try and promote that content, because at the end of the day, the more views, the more analytical data we get on this content is beneficial for the scene overall. But yeah, other than that, obviously remember to like, comment, subscribe, hate, whatever it is you feel like doing today, my friends. Obviously, once again, thanks to Duck for joining us as always, and that will be the end of the episode, so peace.